Hello, this is Niswander, and you're watching the Nowman Show. And with me right now is Adam Rice, who is from the Progressive Independent Network, or PIN Network, and you are watching the PIN Network news on the Nowman Show. So, hello, Adam.
Hey, how
How's,
are you?
how's everything in Maine?
It's been warm today, but it's been good. Uh,
Warm as in
uh,
60
about,
degrees?
I think it felt like 70, and
Oh, really?
it was
Wow.
pretty sunny out. But then again, it was snowing like 3 or 4 days ago. So,
Yeah,
um,
and that's been a common occurrence this year, all around Middle America, from what I understand. So,
yeah, it's not
and
normal.
it's not normal. I mean, and that's what I try to tell critics or skeptics of the climate crisis is that we are seing more cases of all different kinds of climate extremes. And I know when I was a kid growing up, you'd see those things. I mean, it was a fluke though. If you had like in the late 70s, there were two winters in a row where we had these horrendous blizzards, right, back to
Yeah,
back, two winters back to back. And but that kind of extreme happening like that was considerably rare to what we're seeing now. And now it just seems like there's all kinds of extremes every year, everywhere on the planet. Somewhere there's things going on. It
yeah.
seems like throughout the year.
And I know in our state, I don't remember what year in the 90s, but it was like the Great Ice Storm where it just snowed so much and like everyone there, nobody had water for a night. And everyone had to go to like City Hall and there was a boil order. It was like super crazy and a storm. But now you get these crazy winter blizzards like all the time in the winter. And it's just, that's normal. That's commonplace in just a few years time. And uh and now in most recent years, like this last winter, almost no snow. It would have huge blizzards, but then it would be warm for 2 days and it would all melt and there's like never really any snow on the ground.
I know it's weird. I have family back east, and they would tell me all kinds of stories. Even just this past week, their flowers or tulips started blooming, and yet they had a snow, and then the snow melted fast because it warmed up again because the seasons are changing.
Right.
So, and I know there's other parts of Middle America where because of that snow and so much, they got so much of it, or they got a lot of rain, or both, that when it does warm up and it melts, then it floods the fields and they can't plant the seeds for the crops. And by this time, all that should have been done, right? So that they can harvest it like in June or July or whatever. So some things are going to be late this year, whatever that's going to mean for the economy and prices and whatever. Who knows? But I mean, what did we see here? We had worst wildfires in the history of California, I think we've had here in the last year. And what else? It's just what's next, I guess, is kind of the
Yeah.
thing. Like,
You know, it's sad, but next year it's probably going to be the worst wildfires we've ever seen, the worst flooding we've ever seen, or the worst blizzards we've ever seen. And then year after year, it's the same thing because every year's worse than the last now with the crazy weather.
and for how many years now? I don't know. The reports have come out that each year, was it since at least in the last 5 years, if not more, every year becomes the record hottest year on record.
Yeah.
It's becoming a yearly occurrence now. So, and I saw a report. Actually, it was presented as a resolution, I think, at the UN that it was signed by 250 climate scientists around the world.
Wow.
That like if we don't start taking some radical measures, to transition off of fossil fuels and into alternatives, that I don't know if it's 2030 or 2040, but they say that the chances of the overall Earth temperature could now be rising from 6 to 9%. So that's why the Paris Climate Summit was kind of like not all that successful because they came to a conclusion that they were too optimistic.
Right.
You know, so here we are. You know, and the thing about it is we just need to develop the technology. And you know, Germany and China is much further along than we are.
Right.
And you know that communist country, China,
Right.
that's actually more capitalist than anything else. You know, they're further along in this than the United States.
Yeah, I've always wondered how they even ended up with that word. I've always looked at it as just tyrannical China. They suppress
Well,
their people and do all this crazy stuff. That's just tyranny.
You can watch on the Nowman Show. There's back to season 1 in 2015.
Oh, cool.
I have a 4-part special series with Professor Richard Wolff, and he spoke at the Musicians Union in Hollywood.
Okay.
And he, in one of the episodes, he talks about, he talks about capitalism and socialism and a little bit about communism. And he talks about how we got the New Deal.
Okay.
And I know it was one of those things that, you know, a lot of us just took for granted that we understood what that was, right? Oh, the New Deal was like Social Security and unemployment insurance and Social Security disability. And then there was the Civilian Conservation Corps, like you create all those jobs in the national parks. And then there was the WPA that had all the infrastructure jobs. Like there's still places around the world. I know country, not world. I know 2 places here in Southern California where you can still see an imprint in cement that talks about, you know, the WPA, or you know that this project was part of the WPA in 1930 whatever, you know.
Oh wow.
Even here in Pasadena where I live, I was going to Staples on the east side of Pasadena, and as I was crossing the intersection there, across the main drag called Colorado Boulevard, and I looked down and I saw this thing it was in the pavement. It actually said some steel company, you know, as part of WPA in 1930 something. And I said, wow, it's still there. You know, the whoever created, you know, the cement or whatever that was in you know, Colorado Boulevard, you know, that was done, you know, as part of the New Deal. And there's sidewalks. There's a sidewalk I know in my old neighborhood, Studio City, that that's still there. You see in the sidewalk. They haven't even repaired that sidewalk. You know, it's still there. It shows that, you know, it's inside the cement. That was part of, you know, the New Deal in the 1930s. So there were jobs. I mean, there were something like 15 million jobs that were created in a very short period of time. And I didn't know about some of the regulation, like the regulation of Wall Street, which was the Banking Act 1933 and 1934. And I learned about that actually at Occupy. I didn't know what it was. I saw these signs. There were a lot of signs at Occupy because everybody had their own issues and stuff, you know, and there were probably hundreds of signs. And I took lots of pictures, which I still have in a hard drive.
And you know, coming from
I remember seeing this sign that said, you know, reenact Glass-Steagall.
Yeah, that same thing happened.
Yeah, and I felt embarrassed because, like, I don't even know what that is.
That same thing happened to me with the Yellow Vest.
Yeah, and then I asked somebody, well, what is Glass-Steagall? And they explained to me, you know, that was during Bill Clinton's administration. And I still didn't really understand the full extent of it until I had journalist Robert Scheer on my show in 2016. And
Okay.
he laid it out clearly on the show. You can go back and watch the episode. But I might as well do a little plug. But like I was talking about that 4-part series.
Yep.
You can see that on the Nowman Show, I think on the Arroyo channel, because I have 2 Nowman shows. One is the Nowman Show on the Arroyo channel, which on YouTube, which focuses on the content that broadcasts on TV.
Okay.
Because the show broadcasts on an actual TV channel here in the Los Angeles area.
Cool.
It's called the Arroyo channel.
Right.
And then I have another YouTube channel for the Nowman Show that's just called the Nowman Show, which you're going to be watching right now when this is in video form.
Yeah.
And that's, I put just whatever, whatever goes on that,
Right.
any kind of format, even if I record something on my cell phone that, you know, I put it there, and
Cool.
so that I have 2 different places. But anyway, I also have Robert Shear. You can see my interviews, there's 2 episodes with him. And he talked about the Futures Commodity Modernization Act, and then there was there's 2 of them, in other words. There was one in 1998, and that got rid of Glass-Steagall, like everything. And then 2 years later, there was the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, which was actually worse, he said, because that's when they recreated the kinds of stock investments that they got rid of with Glass-Steagall. You know, because they could clearly identify that was a big part of what caused the crash in 1929. So that's why the Glass-Steagall was part of the New Deal, so that wouldn't happen again. But the bankers, you know, like the Chase Manhattan, the Bank of America, Wells Fargo, they've been around a long time. Citigroup, Citibank, they said, no, we want to get back. That's good money for us if we can participate in Wall Street stock trading again. And we don't want to just do boring banking business. We want to have some excitement again. And that's why they, over time, got rid of the regulations from the New Deal. And when you know it, 8 years later, we have another crash, the second largest one in the history of our country. And 10 years after, here we are. Well, now it's 11 years after now, almost 12. And, you know, there's still no recovery for probably at least half the country.
And, you know, it just in hindsight, you know, from somebody who didn't even understand really what was going on back then, the only thing I remember seeing on TV or in the news was, we're bailing out the banks. It's going to be good for everyone. They just trust us. Like, you know, everybody's fine, whatever. They didn't even put Glass-Steagall back. That from a layman, like, that could happen again, because really we just paid their debts, and they're still gambling with, you know, this crazy setup that we've known for like 100 years. That law should be there for a reason.
Well, yeah, and it was. I mean, because, you know, some of those stocks were like based on, like, you know, there was this insurance company, AIG.
Yeah.
And I don't know all the technical terms. I know credit default swaps, derivatives. There's another one that Professor Scheer mentioned, and it's just, and he said basically, you know, if the mafia would have created those, they'd be in the slammer. That's what he said. But the banks just, they can do whatever they want, and they complained about, you know, that if they weren't bailed out, you know, that it'd be devastating for the economy. But what happened was, it didn't really make any kind of difference on the economy except their greed. They got richer, you know. They didn't suffer, you know, really, and they weren't going to suffer.
Well, and that's the thing too, because like we have fractional reserve banking right now.
Yeah.
There's not even that much cash on hand. So I mean, where money's it's like credit for the most part. So really, like, couldn't they have technically just fixed that in the system and not needed the money, right? Or am I totally misunderstanding that?
Well, I'm sure there could have been alternate. I'm not an expert, you know, on those matters, but I'm sure. I mean, I think common sense would tell us that something else could have been done. I mean, well, they could have failed, right? I mean, even in 2008, Bear Stearns and the Lehman Brothers, they were kind of like the sacrificial lambs, so they were allowed to fail. But you know, the expression of, you know, too big to fail, they used that, right? Because they were, you know, the 4 biggest banks, you know, like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Chase Manhattan, and Citigroup, which is Citibank.
Right.
So they used that tagline, well, we're too big to fail. But the reality of the situation is, not only did they not go under, they started making huge profits, and they have contributed to the grotesque wealth inequality since that time. It's gotten really bad. I mean, since Occupy Wall Street, it was like when David DeGraw was doing the economic research, it was like 1% had 40% of the wealth or something like that. And it's worse now. And it's largely because the banks weren't allowed to fail and they got bailed out. And then Obama didn't do anything else, essentially. I think he just went back to like that old Reagan trickle-down economics stuff. Oh, just let the market do its thing, you know, and everybody with half a brain knows that that's not going to work because it didn't work before.
Right. Well, you know, at the same time, he was also passing laws to legalize propaganda and to allow them to take things off the internet, you know, the NDAA laws. So
Right.
how hard would that be to believe? We'll just control the media and tell them the same thing, and they'll probably believe it.
Yeah, and you know what that was? That was the well, it was the NDAA budget.
Yeah, yeah.
In for 2017, but Obama signed it into law in December of 2016. That was, you know, during his lame duck session.
Yeah.
Just like that, when I mentioned that financial futures modernization, or the Commodity Futures Modernization Act.
Yeah.
During the Clinton administration, that was signed during his lame duck session. Only he did that so late, it was in January of 2000. He was about literally to leave office.
Oh, wow.
At least Obama, you know, signed NDAA in December, a few weeks before that. But
Right.
still, the same kind of idea. It was the lame duck session or lame duck period. And I know the bills, you know, those are the kinds of bills, you know, the military budget. That's why the military budget's like in the hundreds of billions of dollars or whatever.
Yeah.
Because all these senators, you know, they see an opportunity to get a bill in there, so they get it slipped in, and the next thing you know, a bill that might start like this, then suddenly is like this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was the Counter Propaganda Act of 2016 was one of those bills that was stuck in the NDAA. So. And I read some of the language in that, and you know, it seemed like not long after the NDAA was passed, it seemed like we were hearing that term fake news more and more and more. You know, and that's exactly what it is, because propaganda, by definition, it can be a lie or it can be the truth.
Yeah.
So, in other words, we can present truth as propaganda to counteract the lies that are propaganda, which is really what we need to be doing. You know, with every storyline, to make sure that the facts get out there, or at least that there's conversation.
Yeah.
Nothing other than the mainstream media narrative. You know, so we have to create our own propaganda, but propaganda based on truth, propaganda based on lies.
Right.
So we can counteract that. So, but what we're seeing with Assange. Obviously, everybody knows that story, but maybe they don't know that story. You know, that to me, the common sense thing, and you know, get your take on it. But my thing is, even more than anything else, that video, the two videos, I should say, that were part of that, what Chelsea Manning turned over to WikiLeaks. And by the way, he went to Washington Post or New York Times or both, and they weren't interested. Right? So that's why he went to WikiLeaks, because he wanted to turn this information over to someone. Right? And those two videos in particular should be obvious. I mean, those are innocent civilians being killed, joyfully killed by our military. Now that's a war crime. So you're going to whisk somebody out of the Ecuadorian embassy in London to try to prosecute them for revealing that the U.S. military committed crimes against innocent civilians, even reporters for Reuters.
Right.
So, and not only that, if he tried to offer it to the New York Times and the Washington Post and they didn't want it, but then they eventually did release some of that stuff. I know. Why aren't they going to get prosecuted? Why aren't they being dragged out of their offices to be questioned?
Well, it's not really funny. But most of these events, when I heard about them on the news, nobody's saying this came from the information of Julian Assange or whatever. It's like they took what he revealed and wrapped it all up neatly into a bow, took his name out of it, and spun the story so it, you know, people felt the way they wanted them to feel about it. You know, versus here's the video, make up your own mind. I'm going to tell you about the video, not show it to you. And it's crazy, it's really crazy. And journalists are supposed, I mean, I always figured they'd look out for each other, not like the people on the TV throwing one guy under the bus. It's
Well, there was it, I'm not sure the exact count. You'd have to go back and watch the Robert Scheer episode. But I think there's something like 7 whistleblowers that were put in prison during Obama's administration. That's a record.
I believe it. Just, the thought just came to me too with those different like counter propaganda laws. It's almost as if they time up a little bit with this whole Edward Snowden and like Assange and Chelsea Manning, all of that. It's almost like you wonder, is that the motivation for putting all those things in there? Because all these people finally started revealing everything and they couldn't legally, slander the truth teller or delete their information off the internet, or God only knows what else they're doing because of that. To me, that's what it seemed like. Those laws were written ahead of time because they knew people were going to start speaking out about all this stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and just like, this was an allegation that was created 7 years ago. So allegation means nothing is proven,
right?
Or innocent until proven guilty is what that means. And just, or assumption, making an assumption. And I think what they did is they created this 7 years ago so they could say, well, it's out there. So whenever if we need it, it's out there. Right.
Right.
So then they could call it an allegation and it's, that's fine in their view. So it's like the weapons of mass destruction. I mean, they created that at some point, and that was an allegation as well. And of course, they found a time and a place to use that, and the rest is history. We went to war. There was even anti-war protests, with hundreds of thousands of people. Let's say, for instance, in New York City, and it didn't matter.
I think I saw one video
and made the war happen anyway, even though that was based on allegations. And we have since found that there were no weapons of mass destruction. That was completely fabricated.
I saw this one video that was really powerful. It was actual like soldiers from our military that came back and started protesting the war and just telling the truth. This is what I saw over there. This is what we actually did. And it's great. We're still there.
Yeah, and how many other wars were created as a result of, first it was, Iraq, and then it was Afghanistan, and then how many since? Syria, Yemen.
And you always find out too, maybe 5 or 10 years after, a war, a conflict, that all of the other things or motivations that were really why we were there, in like poppy fields or oil or gold or like a coup, so we can put someone in power. And I think I really have yet to see one instance where someone like wasn't profiting, or some group wasn't profiting from both sides of the war and extorting some other country, and then giving them a corrupt government before we actually leave.
Right.
It's like that really don't think that's what our military is for. And I look at it like they're being manipulated. Probably in many ways. They love our country. They want to protect our country and our citizens. And then they sign up for something that you'll go to jail if you find out, hey, I don't agree with this, and you're stuck there.
That's right. They make all these promises, you get free education and all this. It's very tempting. They tempt a lot of people, especially if they come from poor families and they need a job or they need income, especially these days.
Yeah.
Economy being so bad, and then we're seeing what's interesting, and we're seeing in Venezuela that what I think it used to be a lot easier to play that game and deceive the public, and they're the government and the military is not having an easy time convincing the public that they're not trying to intervene in Venezuela's business to get access to more of that oil. People aren't buying it in the United States. They're not buying it around the world, and that's why, there was an attempt to kill Chavez. There was also an attempt to kill Maduro already, right? So this thing with Guaido was just another way. With the sanctions, they were building it up. They put the sanctions in place, which was more about an economic war than it was a crisis.
Okay.
Because then they wanted to bring in Guaido to set up the situation to where the people would say, okay, here's a solution. We have this problem. Maybe it's better that Maduro goes. It didn't work. It didn't fly. And there was also, I think, a decision at some point to try to kill Maduro with a drone bomb, and that went all over the world too. And it's like, so you have to question, so this is the resistance, right?
Right.
Why are you wanting to kill someone with a drone bomb? Because he's a horrible dictator? Well, how come a lot of the people that you see, even in the mainstream media, they look very well dressed, or they look clean, like they're wearing clean clothes. They look like they've been eating a lot of tortillas. Right. They look very healthy, and at both Guaido rallies and Maduro rallies. Right. So there's this famine that they're talking about. I mean, it was almost embarrassing. I saw a CNN clip showing people I think it was a Guaido rally, and you heard the narrator below talking about the horrible economic conditions and the famine.
Yeah, I've heard
and
that.
I'm like, all the people I'm looking at in the picture while they're saying that, they look very well fed. Their clothing, the women have these nice purses. I mean, the image did not fit the narrative, and CNN is broadcasting this. See, and the general public is so brainwashed, they're not paying attention to stuff like that. Yeah. And there is a significant number of people that are not buying into this anymore. I think even some of the people that were supportive of Guaido that didn't like Maduro, still like, well, maybe this U.S. intervention thing is not such a good idea. Yeah, so there's another thing that has failed. So what are they going to try next? Is Trump going to say they're going to send U.S. troops in there? If he does that, that will create a war.
Yeah, and that's what's happening.
We're our friends.
Not even being for or against the guy, just whoever was in power right now. If we send the troops in there in these conditions, that's not going to be good for anyone.
No, it's not. Nobody's going to benefit from that except maybe a few people at the top of the 0.01%.
With the people of Venezuela, I'm sure it's not everybody wants one guy or everybody wants the other. I'm sure they probably are split a little bit. That's how elections go. Not everyone doesn't always want the same thing. But, that's for the people to figure out at the end of the day. Us coming in and giving them, like, a new leader or using our militaries, it really shouldn't. I don't look at that as a good idea. Because it's just, that's history. Every time we've done that, it's been bad, and why would it be any different now? We have the same type of government, the same corrupt things going on all throughout our system. Why wouldn't that same 1% be sending troops down there really to just ensure they get more money out of it?
Absolutely. So I think that story is, there's one distraction after another, and we don't know what could be planned next, and just everything is becoming like a reality show. As the news goes, and I just, to me, I'm more focused on what I would call solutions. But I understand the importance of identifying a problem. Like I tell people, like in my own personal life, if I'm interested in solutions, if there's a problem I have, I need to acknowledge what the problem is as it is. I can't imagine that the problem is something that it's not and then try to solve it. I've got to understand what the problem is first. Then I can work on solutions to solve the problem. So that's kind of why I talk about this stuff as I do, because, if we're going to come up with solutions, we have to know exactly what the problem is, or at least have some kind of conversation going on so we can, have put more thought into it, because it
Oh,
is a black and white thing most of the time. There's, like in the case of Venezuela, I mean, it could be that at the very, very least, I think Chavez and Maduro uh, didn't work hard enough to try to diversify their economy. It's too focused on oil,
right. Yeah.
and at the very least, that's my critique of them.
And I watched John Oliver, I think it was on HBO, did a segment probably like a year ago on this. He was talking about Maduro before this crisis happened. And he was talking about how he actually just gave too much to the people. Everybody got like a TV and all this new stuff. Like maybe he could have saved some of that money and not given all this extra stuff to the people. And he made the argument that he was just really not good with money, that like he wasn't out to screw anyone over, but he was just really bad with money, and he just screwed up the bookkeeping pretty bad.
Well, he was a truck driver.
No way, I didn't see. And that's
truck driver.
That's
and he was a good friend of Chavez, which is why they call him a dictator. I think is, well, Chavez basically made him his right-hand man. That's a dictator. That's what a dictator does. What do you call selecting Hillary Clinton as your candidate for the Democratic Party nomination? That's not a mandate before you even have an election. I mean, this is one of the things that gets me about the primaries in 2015, 2016 is like people that think, well, it's perfectly normal. Why wouldn't she be the candidate? She was the most popular. Like, was she really? But because the superdelegates had already made their decision long before there was a so-called election to decide who the candidate would be. I mean, and it's my understanding that when you do an election, that means you use a democratic process for the people to decide who they want their candidate to be in the general election. So that democratic process doesn't decide who that person is until that election happens. Yes. So if you select someone using superdelegates, or even if you don't have superdelegates, you already select someone before that process happens. How is that different than a dictatorship?
Oh yeah, and I had somebody.
I shouldn't laugh, but I think that's a really good question.
Oh yeah, and they I forget who said it in history. You can still have like dictatorships by a group. That doesn't have to be one person to be a dictatorship.
We have that now.
And I did a live with someone a few days ago, and they were talking about how, our officials and the laws they write when they talk, there are like different meanings for a word. You look at like Hillary Clinton, the popular candidate. Well, she got the nomination. Sure, that doesn't make her the most popular candidate. You controlled it, so there was really no way all of the people actually even got a say on who the nominee was.
Well, there were so many different factors, and I know I've gone over this, and so many of us have gone over and over and over it. And the only reason why I would bring it up now is because we could have a repeat situation happening in the next election, and if we do, oh my gosh, you talk about chaos, in the Democratic Party, then that's definitely what would happen, because it should have been obvious in 2015, 2016 who the real front runner was. But now it's blatantly obvious who the real front runner is in the Democratic Party. So if similar things start happening again, there's going to be a lot of not angry people. There's going to be a lot of livid people, because I know a lot of people already avidly working for Bernie right now as we speak, and they're all hoping that it doesn't happen again, because it could. I mean, we have no guarantees. We don't know what's going to play itself out here. But there were so many different things that just the superdelegates alone, and there was the media coverage. Bernie got the least amount of media coverage, and then there was all kinds of irregularities around the country that I was getting reports from all around the country, from everything from missing ballots to ballots being erased, because when you do these ballot machines, it's like you use a pencil.
Yeah.
I heard that there were polls that were closing early. There were polls that were moved at kind of in the last week or two. So when people would look at their booklet, then they went to the location and said, where's the poll? Well, it was moved.
Right.
You know, so they said, well, I'm not going to go 2 blocks away and go vote, or I don't know where it's at, so I'm just going to go home. And then there was, and this started, I think, in 2006, but something like 40 to 45%. It fluctuates. I don't know what it is right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't go up to 50% of registered voters are registered independent. So that means of the low voter turnout that there already was,
Right.
that only maybe 28% were registered Democrat, 25% were registered Republican. So if there was a low turnout of that, that means most of the people that went out to vote technically may not have even been Democrat or Republican as far as their affiliation of how they're registered.
Well, a lot of this,
So they just decided at the last minute that they were going to vote Republican or Democrat, so they switched, from independent or whatever, so that they could vote for, Trump or Hillary. I think that, and I know for a fact too, in Middle America, where I grew up, people were ready to vote for Bernie Sanders because they did in the primaries, and when they couldn't vote for him in the primaries, they voted for. They either didn't vote or they voted for Trump a lot.
Yeah.
So there's so many different factors.
That's like, my mother-in-law said the same thing too. She, it was between Bernie or Trump for her. She liked Bernie, but the simple fact that he wasn't on the ballot, her takeaway was, I'm just going to get Hillary if I don't vote for Trump.
Yeah.
And like
but the hope though this year is that just in recent news, Bernie Sanders did a town hall on Fox. And from what I understand, the establishment Democrats weren't happy about that.
Yeah.
But oh well.
And
and I noticed that there was something like there was a high favorability of Fox viewers before the town hall, and after the town hall, they did another poll. It went up. Fox viewers, and that people told me at the town hall when Bernie Sanders was talking about Medicare for all, he was getting applause from the audience on Fox.
Right.
So things are changing out there. And I think that if the Democratic Party isn't careful, they're going to hand it over to Trump again. And it would be the worst possible mistake on their part if again they blame it on Bernie.
Well,
because they are the ones that they were at fault in 2015, 2016. And if Trump becomes president again, it's going to be because of them again.
Right. And the way I see it is like, even just within like the Democrats and, the independents and like on that left, like the left side of the spectrum, you have like the Hillary Democrats. Everyone knows they're corrupt. They rigged the last election. They've done a lot of stuff like that. And you have like other people I've followed a few people within the last year, that seem just like normal people. They're not some like establishment person like Hillary, but she's like it's like that group within their own party. It's like they're working to keep anyone but themselves from having a chance to like do good. And and the thing that scares me the most though is that like we've spent like 4 years with people who just watched like the mainstream media for their news coverage, and all they've heard is this Mueller report, collusion. So like what happens in 2020 if it's like a really close thing, and no matter who wins, everyone's going to think the other side cheated, even if they didn't.
Yeah, that's why I think I'm glad we're having this conversation in our first one, so we can get it out of the way. Because I think the important thing to focus on is the solutions.
Yeah.
So, and I think that in strategizing, we'll have to, talk about that some more, because I think a lot of times, as an activist, when you strategize, you don't make it public on the internet.
Right.
In other words, what you talk about is topics to educate people,
Yeah.
so they can, make decisions for themselves about what they think is the best way forward, right?
Oh yeah.
But strategizing, I think that's something to be left for um, meetings when people come face to face or private conversations. That's my view. Now, maybe I'll change that view. I don't know. But that being said, I mean, I think it's important that we all find ways to connect with each other,
Yeah.
however that is, on the internet and in person, because I think it's all hands on deck now. This is an emergency.
And see, like at the same time, through the yellow vest, like a lot of us learned too that like waiting for the next election to think the problems are going to fix, that's not the road there either. There's a lot of stuff we need to do, standing up, speaking out, like reading all these bills that they're passing and saying something if they're bogus, or and going in court watching, I learned recently, actually can help when someone's denied a lawyer. Having people just show up, they behave fairly, and they still get a fair trial. Lots of stuff. And I talk a lot about unity with people too, like having discussions about hard topics, or asking questions about things you don't know about. It's really important because that's what the media does. They do a really good job of convincing a lot of people that if they just hang on another 4 years, everything's going to be better. But and people are missing. It's like, well, you just told me that, and like, why do I have to wait 4 years? Why not now? You know, I'm met with a woman here from the Movement for People's Party in my state, and she was really pleasant. We talked a bit about, how most Americans will all kind of fall in the middle if you're just talking like one issue at a time. Like we're all kind of just like common sense. We want to think critically. We want to make our own opinions of things. But when we get stuck in this, like it has to be this party or that party, you end up having to you don't get to have a say on each issue. You're picking who's going to cover the most of the things I care about. And that's why it's really like the system's kind of set up in a way to keep the power like out of our hands.
Right.
But then you look at something like Occupy, or the Yellow Vests, or like the people in Sudan right now, and those people, they have all the power when they're doing that. Standing up in that capacity, that's when the change happens. It's we're not at a place right now in America where we can really expect the ballot box is going to fix all these problems anymore.
No, and we really do need a movement, and I think that's what I like about the Yellow Vests in France is, and I'm so glad that I was able to connect with not just any Yellow Vest protester, but this young gentleman, Roman Light,
Yeah,
because he's focused on what's already part of their constitution, which is called Referendum, and we don't really have anything like that, at least in our U.S. Constitution. I mean, here in California, we have things called propositions and measures. Propositions are state and measures are city. So it's a couple examples. We had a statewide proposition in our 2018 election for rent control.
okay.
And that was throughout the state, right? So anytime it's a proposition, it's like, or a measure, you see people, previous to the election with clipboards, right? And they'll say, they'll have this, you want to sign this, and what's this about? And they'll explain what it's about, blah, 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 blah. And then you put your name and your address on it. So you're signing a petition.
Yeah, we have those here too. They're not called referendums. I was actually just talking to someone about rent control earlier, and how it failed because all of the people on our city council are property managers.
That's right.
So
and that was true, I think, here too, is that it was property, real estate companies with a lot of money invested in, no on Prop 10, right? Yeah. people told me that even the Spanish literature
Right.
was deceptive.
Yeah, it's like
People think that, like, well, if you vote no, then that's for the renter. That's for the renter, right? If you vote no, so people voted no, thinking that they were voting in their own best interest, when it was actually the contrary.
oh yeah,
And that's how it works. I mean, it's money in politics.
yeah.
And I remember the night before the election, I was sitting in a Thai restaurant with a friend, and there were two televisions on either side of where we were sitting, and two different channels, local channels. And I mean, the whole time we were there, it seemed like every 2 minutes or so there was a commercial for no on Prop 10. And I said, I know what's going to happen, because they've got all the money to do this advertising. And sure enough, Prop 10 didn't pass. And same thing, but there was this Measure B in the city of Los Angeles that some friends of mine worked on for a public bank. And it got 43% of the vote or something like that. So it didn't pass. But there's forward momentum on this of some kind of public bank statewide now. And our governor has signed, he's passed, he approved of, or supported, I should say, a resolution for the public bank in the state of California. So they're moving forward on it, because a public bank keeps, money in California. It's basically California's money in a banking institution that keeps the money here. Because if you invest something in Wells Fargo, let's say in Maine,
yeah,
money's not going to stay in Maine, dude. It's going to go wherever Wells Fargo wants that money to go.
oh yeah,
You know what I'm saying? And but people need to be educated about these things. And that's only one issue, right? So, but in the referendum thing, see, in Europe, that's part of most, if not all, constitutions across Europe, for instance. And I know they have one in Australia,
right.
and they have one in Switzerland, because I know they have it in England too, because they're talking about it in the context of Brexit,
Right.
But in Switzerland, I have family there, and it got my attention a few years ago in a couple of different referendums. One was for universal basic income, and the other one was to minimize the gap in salaries between CEOs and the lowest paid workers. Because right now it's like insane, like 300, 400 times, the CEO makes more than like an average worker in a company. And so they were proposing, to narrow that to down, was it 50 times, something like that. And that resolution and the UBI resolution didn't pass, but they got 40-something% of the vote, the national vote. So they considered that some progress, because it took those issues and they got out there in the international news, right?
Yeah.
So that's what they considered. At least we got it started. We got the conversation started, and that was 2015, I think, 2016. Right. So that's when I first learned about referendums. So when I found Roman Light and connected with him, that's his focus with the LFS, is to educate people about what they call the referendum initiated by the citizens. Same thing. Everybody calls it something different. And I see that as a solution, because the people have to have the power, right? The people don't have the power. We give our power away to our representatives that really they're just serving the 1%.
Yeah.
And we have to take this into our own hands. I just got a message here. Oh, fantastic. I'll find out about connecting with Michael Brooks tomorrow. Michael Brooks of The Michael Brooks Show.
Cool.
He has a popular show on YouTube, along with Sam Cedar, who use the same studio. Richard Wolff was on there actually recently, talking about UBI, which I want to get to.
Cool.
As a matter of fact, here's what I want to do. I want to say next time we have a PIN network news program, I want to get into universal basic income for one thing, because Andrew Yang, who's running for president of the United States, is going to be here in downtown Los Angeles Monday night at Pershing Square, where I've seen many great rock concerts. He's going to be there talking about universal basic income, and I'm interested. I mean, I've heard some of his talks online, but
Yeah, I heard some of his too, and I actually shared one a while back, and I don't know if you've ever heard of Rocco Millen before. I met him through the Yellow Vest.
hmm,
He's in the. There's a lot of people who talk a lot in the Yellow Vest about modern monetary theory, which I
hmm,
think derives from Stephanie Kelton, I believe, and
right.
they are very not the good word. They like the federal job guarantee as an idea over the UBI. But these are both still things that I'm kind of still learning about. Um, so that was really like the big feedback I've gotten as far as the like, is a UBI a good idea or a bad idea? Um, but I predicted it with him. There's no coverage. No one's. I've seen a couple too. There's another guy. He's from Puerto Rico that's running that has,
Juan Carlos or something, or
yeah, I think it's Juan something. He's been using Facebook. I caught a live stream someone did with him that was another good independent person, but yeah, I don't foresee these guys really getting on the TV, so it's an uphill battle, really, for anybody who's not a front runner.
yeah, I think the though that well, we got some good news this week that Tulsi Gabbard is going to definitely be in the summer debates. She got enough individual contributions that she's going to be able to join Bernie Sanders on that
Yeah,
debate.
I've heard her brought up quite a bit. At first, I thought she was just going to run with Bernie, and then it was in all this Assange stuff that she was like the only person or something in the government really that's released like a very clear public statement about like Assange should be let out and not arrested for that. So that really caught my eye. That somebody actually cares about that issue, because that's an important one to me, and I really don't understand why more people aren't taking that stance along with the people.
Yeah, if for no other reason but the common sense of, I mean, just tell somebody, well, watch those black and white videos and get back to me.
Right.
And then why would you want to prosecute someone when that information was revealed? I mean, that could have been your parents or your kids that were killed,
Yeah.
and it was done illegally in war, a war crime.
Right.
So the British police and working with the president of Ecuador and the embassy took this man into custody for revealing the truth. Are you okay with that?
No.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that we really need to say to people, right?
And
I mean, to get people to think about what actually happened here. And remember, Chelsea Manning was given clemency. First of all, Barack Obama is who is responsible. His administration, and Barack Obama specifically, since he was commander in chief, was responsible for putting these whistleblowers in jail, including John Kiriakou and others, as well as Chelsea Manning.
I didn't know he put
And then Barack Obama gives Chelsea Manning clemency. So now you're going to arrest her again? Why? You gave her clemency. And it's based on the issue, this very issue, that you gave her clemency.
And it's like, wouldn't that sounds like double jeopardy to me too? If you already arrested her and then gave her clemency, how can you just?
Yeah. So what's really going to see? And this is the kind of conversation we need to have with those that want to be critical of Assange. And by the way, another thing too, why would somebody drop allegations for sex abuse, right? With the indication that it really wasn't anything of any substance, and now they're thinking about bringing it up again. I mean, it's so blatantly obvious that there's something wrong here with this picture. Right. So what we really need to do is talk to our fellow citizens about, talk logic, talk common sense, just like Russiagate. I say things to people like, the fact of the matter is, and there never has been, and there still isn't, actual evidence proving that the Electoral College votes were changed or tampered with so that Trump would win. And that's really specifically what would have had to happen in order for Trump to win.
Yeah.
If it was in fact rigged. Right. So if there's no proof that that happened, guess what? There's no proof that Russiagate is anything at all other than alleged, and it's nothing more than hype.
Right.
Just like the weapons of mass destruction. It was just created as an allegation so somebody could pull it out of the hat whenever they thought they needed it for something.
Yeah,
and that's what you call propaganda lies.
Yeah. And
so
it comes back to the media. All these things that didn't even happen. The only reason we believed it is because the media is saying things that this is true, this is happening, when there's clearly no evidence, and you're not saying like this person thinks this might be the case. It's this happened, and like a couple years later, okay, it didn't happen. Believe us on this next lie. Like, I promise you it's true this time.
Yeah, so the next time that we talk, I do want to go into more detail about universal basic income because there's a lot to talk about. And I think after seeing Andrew Yang and having conversations with people that are into that subject matter, which I'm also going to have on my in my next production at Pasadena Media Studio.
Great.
Have a panel discussion about that will include universal basic income.
Cool.
But we're also going to critique it as well. And go into more detail about it and take a look at other factors, going forward. But I will just say, in a nutshell, we can get into this next time. I wrote a proposal for a referendum idea that would be, in a nutshell, something like taxing the commons. In other words, the commons are when there's products that are created through the commons.
Yeah.
All are contributing to that. So we all should benefit from it. So why is the vast majority of the wealth created from this, such as fossil fuels, such as intellectual property, like when we post things on social media like Facebook, they get to make a lot of money. How come we don't? As a matter of fact, they will sometimes block us for whatever reasons, and maybe they're trying to get us to buy ads so they can make additional money, and yet we're offering them all this information for free in the internet commons. When we do transition to like solar and wind and hydropower systems using water, that's part of the commons. That's something that we all share. Why should we have to, if we're going to pay for this, which includes taxes to the federal government, why can't we actually get some kind of dividend from it in return? You know what I mean? Because the commons, nobody should own the commons, especially when the wealth is created there. We should be able to share that wealth. And that's how they'll get the funding for whatever it is, be it called a dividend. I think Yang calls it freedom dividend. And then he just uses the words universal basic income because those are the
the one I saw, he was talking about like a value added tax.
Yeah.
I guess they do that in Europe. And that leaves me curious because it's like I see Europe now and it's like, God, like is that the taxes or is that something else? But I don't understand these terms. I don't understand a lot of these terms as well as I should. But he has a unique approach because he's the only one talking about the automation. I think that's the right way to put that. As more things go to like self-service, people are just losing jobs too from that. So how do you replace that moving forward? And that's what I understand that becomes, but I don't understand economics. It seems like that's always everyone's issue is like taxes, money, income, jobs, and yet it's probably purposely the least taught thing in like high school.
Absolutely.
You have to choose to learn that, and then you find out, man, I wish I understood these things so I could know what's going on out there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, next time, I mean, I do some economic analysis, but I'm not an economist, and the best kind of person to talk about these things would be, someone like Professor Richard Wolff. But I can definitely share what I do know and share some more specific ideas about my referendum idea, which also involves, workers and worker owners and work weeks and, as well as dividends and, everybody benefiting from, what's created together in the commons. I can talk about the commons.
Cool, yeah, because I would like to hear more about that. Specifically with the like the data use. That was one of the things that caught my ear as having all come out of like the yellow vests in America, trying to piece together like our asks if we actually get out when we get out there and can have the people out there was like, if you're going to make money off our data, we should be getting some of that money. It's our data and our information. Why do you all of a sudden get the right to profit off of that?
Well, we can also go into the permanent fund in Alaska, and Thomas Paine, one of the founding fathers, supported. We can get into that next time, but I wanted to bring that up. And we can also next time talk more about the Green New Deal, and maybe a little bit about the origin of that, because there's still more to learn about that myself. We can talk about what I think is, well, at some point, if we don't get into it next week, I think it's the best economic platform on the planet right now is actually in the UK. And it's part of the left wing of the Labour Party's manifesto. And it's based on an idea from the 1970s that was squashed by Margaret Thatcher and the Conservatives. And that's called the alternative models of ownership, right? And that got squashed by the Conservatives and trickle-down economics in the late 70s. But Corbyn was around then, so he had a lot to do with it. So it's back in the left wing of the Labour Party's manifesto document. And in that part of the document is called Democratize the Economy. So we can go into that in more detail next time too. That's a solution. I definitely think that, and that might be why they're delaying, Theresa May losing power, because they really know, when Corbyn comes into power, he's going to make a big deal about that. And that scares, again, the 1%, because that means it's going to be money out of their pockets. But they're going to have to come to their senses and realize the way the money is being distributed now is not anywhere close to democratic or fair. I mean, in this country alone, in the United States, 40 to 45% of the population can't afford basic necessities.
Oh, yeah.
And then the wealth that's created there's more wealth being created, but it's going to fewer and fewer people. Yeah. That's why you have, the whole Fortune 400 now is billionaires. Didn't used to be that way.
Oh yeah.
And so we've got to. So there's a lot of solutions, but we really need to educate each other, and we really need to bring this to the public and start having real conversations about what will change, and make things better for the masses of people and give us more democracy, because we really have an oligarchy now. Yeah. That's another thing too, because in 2014 there was a study done at the University of Princeton. They studied over 1,700 bills between 1981 and 2002, probably ending with the Patriot Act.
Okay.
And they determined every single one of those bills really didn't require any input from the masses of people. So basically that conclusion would be that the United States government is 100% oligarchy. Because to be a democracy, you and I and the masses of people have to have more input and stuff like that. We had none.
Yeah.
And so that should be an eye-opener right there. And the philosopher Sheldon Woolen calls our type, well, he's passed away now. He passed away in the last few years. Chris Hedges did a lengthy interview with him that you can see on YouTube. Okay. So if you type in Sheldon Woolen, Wolin,
yeah,
and Chris Hedges, you can see it's like a 3-hour long interview. He talks about what he calls inverted totalitarianism. He says that's the kind of government that we have. In other words, he's comparing that to the totalitarianism that was associated with socialism and communism in the 20th century. And those dictators literally controlled the corporate state. Because remember, we had capitalism and industrial revolution going on then, right? But the dictators were basically controlling the corporate state. So that's the totalitarian, authoritarian governments that just happen to call themselves socialist and communist in the 20th century. Okay, but fast forward to the 21st century, Sheldon Woolen says the United States government is a inverted totalitarian government, which means the corporate state tells the government how to run things. And that's exactly what we have. What do you call money in politics? That's what it is. The corporations get the money. They make all the important decisions. The government just kind of has to. That's why Nancy Pelosi won't give us, she's not in favor of Medicare for all, because she works for those people. She doesn't work for us.
Right.
See, and the American people need to understand this. This is serious. But at the same time, I agree with Jill Stein. I think they're quaking in their boots. I think they're genuinely afraid that we're figuring it out. And there's nothing you can do about it, right? It's only a matter of time.
What?
And I mean, when people need to eat, I mean, that's what's going on in France. I mean, I heard people in the LOS that I was watching online, when it was first starting out in November and December, they were saying things like, by the 20th of the month, I don't have enough money to pay my bills or to feed my kids.
Right.
That's why I'm here. So it's about wealth inequality. And if people don't have enough to even eat or feed their kids, yeah, they're going to be kind of upset, especially if they turn on their TV and you say nothing absolutely about them that even impacts their life, right? You see your president on TV like Macron wearing an expensive suit, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to get food put on the table at the 20th of the month. I mean, this is the level of hubris in this country. I mean, it is correct to say that we are on the verge of a political revolution, like Bernie says, because hubris means that you have a wealthy class that's just really out of touch with what's going on with everybody else. And that's what's happening. And some of these people may not even be bad people. They just don't get it, right? They think what's important is, I got to make more profits. That's how the system works. While stepping over homeless people on their way to their Wall Street office. I mean, this is the insanity of what's going on out there. So we have to focus, in my view, on solutions. And some of those solutions have to be done through the educational processes of media, like what you and I are doing right now. Showing people also that we want to connect. Like-minded people are connecting, and talking, and they're expressing themselves, and we're sharing information with each other right now. And this information is going to be shared with other people, not only in the PIN network, but elsewhere. And by the way, I'm going to take this time right now. That's why I was hoping Larry was going to be here to join us, because Larry Alger introduced me to the PIN group, and we met each other at Occupy.
Yeah, he's good.
I believe
He has his own network too, right? It's like a Justice News Network, right?
Justice News Network. He has his online media work, which is called JNN, Justice News Network. And of course, my show is called The Nowman Show. It's been on the Arroyo channel, based out of Pasadena here in Southern California. It's been on the air since 2015. We're in our 5th season right now. Have over 100, I think about 120 episodes. And it's literally a variety show. I mean, I call it a cultural magazine variety show focusing on arts, entertainment, education, and news. So that literally, I'm all across the board. And as a musician and an artist, I also have hosted variety shows in nightclubs. So I like variety. And I found out when I created this television show, a lot of people tell me they like variety.
Yeah.
So on my show, you can also, there's fun stuff too. It's not all this serious stuff. I mean, I've had David Bowie's Piano Man on my show, Grammy Award winning producer for Stevie Wonder, an Academy Award winning director,
Right.
actors, that you've probably seen on television, like Mike Farrell,
Oh,
and Ed Asner, the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
wow.
And then, of course, I've interviewed people like Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore actually came on my show 3 months before he created his what's now popular YouTube show. And who else has been on? Robert Shear, who's was a Vietnam correspondent for Ramparts magazine, which was read by Dr. Martin Luther King back in the day.
Oh, wow.
And he also interviewed Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, as well as presidents like Nixon and Reagan and Carter. So there's, and then I've had earth scientists on the show. A friend of mine will probably come back later on this year and give us an update, which I'm sure won't be good. So I've had live bands in the show and comedy and again, variety, all kinds of stuff. So this is a platform because I feel that it's important that we have a new renaissance. I like that terminology better than political revolution, but I understand why people use the words political revolution. I, of course, don't condone violence, and people should realize that not all revolutions happen violently. And if people really want peaceful transition for radical change, they're going to have to think about that. Do you want peaceful or do you want violent? It's really up to you. I think you can educate yourself so that we can actually stand together as millions of people and demand the kinds of changes that we need very peacefully. And remember, when it is possible to do these things peacefully, because even in history, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia broke away from the British Crown without a shot being fired. So it can be done. It can be done peacefully. Yes, a radical change can be done without violence. So that's another thing that we need to let people know. And radical, and who doesn't want radical love?
Right.
Genuine caring about each other, genuine compassion. That's radical. And we shouldn't even have to think twice about that. That should just naturally be the way that we look at each other, right? In my view. And if you want to care about someone and they need money, give them some money. Right. If they need food, give them some food. I'm a preacher's kid, so I know some of these references come out sometimes, but there's this passage in the Bible. I'm not really religious, but I do acknowledge the reality of the good stuff and the social sciences that are in there. If somebody asks you for a piece of bread, do you give them a rock? That's where we're at. If somebody's hungry, give them some food. Right. Don't say, well, no, I got $1 million in the bank, but you got to go out and get a job. No, you give them some food. Because we should be putting people ahead of profits.
Right. There you go.
And I wear this a lot on purpose because it's a very simple idea, but it really is something that I think anyone can understand if they really think about it, what that means. It's not saying no profits, it's saying people before profits. In other words, where are your priorities at? So, and we really need to address the audience out there, although I don't think the PEN audience needs to be reminded of that. But when we start sharing this with more and more people, my audience hopefully doesn't need to be reminded of that. But and then Larry's audience too. So yeah, check us out. I guess we could go over the social media stuff. There's a PIN, PIN, Facebook page for all the states out there, right? Excuse me.
Yeah, it's Progressive Independent News. There's a central page. There should be one for every state. I love that. That's Elizabeth Netherland does that. There's a bunch of people who've been helping with that too. I love all those guys. They're really great. To just get out there in all these different communities of even people who disagree and are just like still want to just work together anyways, despite disagreeing on one thing here, one thing there. That's there's a lot more people out there like that than I really thought there was at first. So it's been nice.
Yeah, and definitely. And of course, Justice News Network has a page. The Nowman Show is on Facebook. As I mentioned, the Nowman Show on the Royal Channel and the Nowman Show, two different YouTube channels are out there. So, I am Insta Nowman on Instagram, and at Niswander on Twitter, and at the Nowman Show on Twitter. So check all these different social media things out, connect with us, and we share information, and we're going to start doing more and more of these video shows. This is our first, I guess you could say, debut, premiere of the PIN Network News. And so we're going to try to do this once a week, and we will be live on Sunday, April the 21st, I believe.
Yeah.
That would be, we said 11 a.m., right? 11 a.m. in the morning?
Yeah.
Pacific time, and that would be 2 p.m. Eastern time. And of course, if you're in Paris, or is it, no, in London, I'm sorry. If you're in London, it will be 7 p.m. If you're in Paris and Germany and Netherlands and that part of Europe, then it would be 8 p.m.
Yeah.
That's how we're going to do it for now. I mean, this might change as the weeks go on, but please connect with us. Please spread the word, because we have to get the word out, and we're building coalitions. And I'm doing that with my show, and I know everybody's doing their own thing, and doing that as we bring more and more people together, then we actually can make the world a better place. What do you? We probably should wrap this up, Adam. Thank you so much for taking your time out.
Yeah.
Extended a special edition of the Nowman Show. So what would you like to say in closing?
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for watching whenever this gets put up there. And then if you're watching this before the live, tune in. We've got plenty more we can get into from here. And if you've watched this and you have questions, then feel free to ask them in the comments when we are live on Sunday. Absolutely. And if you have things you would like us to research or talk about, or let us know. Share with us. This is all about communication, right? So yeah. Adam, has been great, and we probably ought to wrap this up. We have actually been talking for a long time, but this is our debut, our beginning. So we're figuring this out, and we'll continue this conversation on Sunday, and then we'll be live, as he said, on Facebook. So until next time, this is Niswander, and representing the Nowman Show. Be present always.